Chapter 11 of Betty Baird by Hamlin Weikel. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Holly Jensen. Chapter 11. The Play. School life went on in quiet grooves, Betty conscientiously holding herself to her studies, which indeed she would be unlikely to neglect, for she realized, as forcibly as a young girl could, her great privilege in being enabled to attend such a school, and this, combined with her ambition to please her parents, led her to study faithfully. She was first in her class in every branch except mathematics, where Miss Leet's continual enmity made it almost impossible for her to overcome her natural distaste for the subject, as she might easily have done with a teacher more friendly and interested. But, though studying hard, Betty looked forward with delight to those regular social events, which, while their sole end seemed to be recreation, were in reality very important parts in the student's training in social manners and usages. The next event on the school calendar was the great play at Christmas, for this year the Thanksgiving reception was to be omitted. Betty's relations with the other girls became daily more intimate and friendly. She was the acknowledged leader of her class in every form of fun, both because of her power of leadership and because of the ingenuousness which endeared her to everyone. The girls always knew just where to find her, Jess said. With the Christmas festivities in prospect, Betty had some secret quavers over her clothes. While she knew there was little or no danger of a repetition of the extremely disagreeable experiences she had passed through, she was none the less anxious to appear well in the eyes of her exceedingly modish companions, and the prospect of having the contrast brought out again on a public occasion was very disquieting. Her feelings, however, were much soothed by Miss Payne's kind offer to put her violet silk into the hands of her own New York dressmaker. When it was returned, it was a new garment. "How did she do it?" cried the delighted and amazed girl. "Oh, Roberts is half French," replied Miss Payne laughingly. Betty spent a silent moment in wondering what Miss Jane would say if she called her Hufnagel, and she almost laughed aloud at the fancy. After heartily thanking her cousin, she took her dress to her room. "Now it is a beauty. It will make your dear friend Miriam open her eyes," said the pleased Lois. The few weeks between Thanksgiving and the Christmas holidays were busy ones for the whole school, and the girls almost forgot to mark off the days from the calendar. The Christmas entertainment was always the largest and the most important one of the year. This time a play was to be given in which Betty was assigned a prominent part, one that Miss Payne decided should be taken only by a girl in short skirts. It was the part of the New Woman. Betty planned a fetching and original costume consisting of a short black skirt, a mannish coat with a stiff-bosomed shirt, smart linen collar, and natty bow tie. These, with a low derby hat on her short fair hair, gave a peculiarly piquant and boyish effect. Tan riding boots with leather leggins and a little riding whip completed the New Woman of the play. The rehearsals were always held in one of the wings of the building, the girls dressing in their rooms, then going through a small back hall and down into the auditorium. After dressing for the last rehearsal, Betty decided, without any particular reason, not to go the usual route, but to go through the long drawing room, which at that hour was never occupied. It was simply a caprice, a mood which required something new. Just before entering the room, she twisted a little piece of paper she found in her book into an imitation cigarette. With this held daintily between the fingers of her left hand and the natty whip in her right, and feeling like a lad of 14, Betty walked jauntily into the room and halfway across the floor before she saw two gentlemen sitting on the sofa in the shadow. She felt her cheeks burn. She could not turn back, and her feet almost failed to carry her forward. She glanced at the figures again, and to her horror found that one was the bishop and the other the dignified rector of their church. Worse and worse! Suddenly the thought came to her, "Maybe they'll think I'm a boy for sure." so she doffed her hat with a right gallant boyish swing. The churchmen responded gravely, and Betty tripped on with a light heart, believing the country was saved. As soon as the rehearsal was over, she rushed to her room to tell Lois, and throwing herself into the rocking chair, she rocked as if her life depended on it. "Oh, Lois, I had the greatest adventure just before rehearsal. Oh dear, I don't know whether to laugh or cry, but it was so funny. I wonder if they could have suspected." Lois, who was curled up on the window seat, looked up in surprise. "Who could have suspected what? What's wrong with you, Bet? What in the world has happened? An adventure? Oh, go on and tell me, you mean thing. What was it?" Alternately shivering with fear lest she had been discovered, and shrieking with laughter as she felt that maybe she had deceived them into thinking she was a boy, Betty told her story. "You fooled them! You fooled them!" cried Lois. "I know you did. Oh, I wish I had been there! What fun! Good boy, good boy!" And she literally danced in her excitement, which so infected Betty that she jumped up and grasped her hands, and in a moment the two were in a mad whirl around the room, which exhaustion alone stopped. Then they sat down and laughed until they cried. At dinner time, Miss Greene asked Betty to come to her room before the study hour, a not unusual request, for the two had become fast friends. Joyfully she ran up to the quiet room. She found Miss Greene grave on the surface, but the twinkle in her eyes evidently indicated an undercurrent of fun. "What is it, Miss Greene?" asked Betty. "This afternoon, Elizabeth, I had 2 distinguished callers," she began gravely, but could not finish, for the girl dropped to the floor a limp mass. "Now I'll do just what I wanted to do then. Sink through the floor." Try as she might to repress a laugh, Miss Greene had to give way. "You incorrigible child, get up and listen to me." "Not before you absolve me," cried Betty dramatically, but getting up nevertheless. "When I went into the drawing room, I caught my serious, dignified guests laughing like schoolboys, though they tried to stop as soon as I appeared. I have known the bishop since I was a child, and he loves to tease me, especially about what he calls my teacherly primness, for I have not always been such a dragon as I am now. Well, I asked what the fun was about, and it pleased the bishop to be very mysterious. "I did not know you had adopted a peculiar garb for your strong-minded young students in this stronghold of intellectuality," he remarked in a tone of grave surprise, as if he had never laughed in his life. Those penetrating eyes of his never left my face, but the hilarity that seemed to emanate from our sober Mr. Carson proved that the bishop had not been suddenly bereft of his reason. And then there were the chuckles that had fallen on my ears as I came in. "What do you mean, Bishop?" I implored, wholly puzzled. "Oh, excuse my then it's not this bewitching costume?" My mystified expression evidently delighted his wicked old heart. "Just before you came in, a young lady passed us dressed in the style, I should think, of the New Woman, a riding whip, and what seemed a cigarette in her hand." "Oh, Miss Greene, not a real one?" "They knew that, dear," she replied, seeing the genuine distress on the girl's face. "They complimented you on your gallantry, and when I told them you were only 14, they understood that it was only a thoughtless prank, and said they were coming to see you play tomorrow night." "Oh, the cuss is come upon me," cried the Lady of Shalott, Betty moaned. "You deserve a scolding for going through the parlors, but I shall say only this. Don't tell anyone about it." "Oh, I had to tell Lois, Miss Greene." "Very well, but make Lois promise not to tell." "Oh, she would never breathe it. She's just the truest girl." "By the way," continued Miss Greene, "the bishop will bring his 2 grandsons to the play, and I want you to talk with them. They are good boys and great favorites of mine." "If they are half as nice as their grandfather, I'll talk to them all right," replied Betty glibly, her mind resting on the familiar, kindly old face. "Et tu, Brute?" sighed Miss Greene, reproachfully. Betty understood, and though she colored, she answered stoutly, "A girl doesn't like to be singular in every respect, Miss Greene." "That is true," answered Miss Greene, a little sadly. She realized that Betty had borne much because of her old-fashioned dresses, and that her fine, quaint language had undoubtedly seemed to the girls a part of her singularity. "You look like a fairy," said Betty rapturously as Lois stood off for inspection after she had dressed for the entertainment. "That is certainly the most elegant, the most recherché, the most stunning dress that ever beautified the Pines." "Is that all?" asked Lois with affected patience, as Betty stopped for breath, then, as if oblivious to any interruption, proceeded, "You will certainly be the glass of fashion and the mold of form, the observed of all observers." And Betty backed up her quotation by twirling Lois around to get the best possible view of the creation. "You'll do," was her peroration. "It is a good little dress," said the preoccupied Lois, "but what's a dress if one's going to act like a dunce? I know I shall forget my recitation tonight." "You simply can't forget it," answered Betty emphatically. "I asked you suddenly last night to recite during all the noise the girls were making, to see if you would be upset, and you did it perfectly." "That was a good test," said Lois, brightening, "but then this will be different. Think of all the strangers who will be there. Oh, my! I am selfish to worry over my little part," she added, "when you have so much. All those words in the play, and the acting too, but you always come out ahead." "Well, if my tongue proves as unruly as my heart is just now, it's up in my throat, a very inconvenient place for it. I'll be packed off double quick to a school for stutterers." Lois looked surprised. "Why, you are not frightened, are you?" "I'm clammy with fear." And though Betty laughed, Lois knew she was doing her best to keep her courage up to the sticking point. "You'll come up and help me to change my dress after the play, won't you? For my fingers will be all thumbs, as Miss Jane says." "Indeed I shall. I am anxious to have the girls see you in that dress as it is now. It is lovely and so becoming. I am glad it is fixed. Cousin Elizabeth was so pleased when I told her how ravishing it is. If she weren't so busy, I think she would be nearly as funny and good to us as Miss Greene. But," and Betty shook her head, "next to the mother, there is no one like Miss Greene for understanding." Lois had finished dressing and was sitting on the window seat, alternately groaning and reciting her poem. Betty rambled on while she put the finishing touches to the new woman's suit. "I wonder whether the bishop will know me when I am changed into a little girl. I wonder what his grandsons will be like. Oh, hateful as all boys are, teasing and rude. However, Miss Greene says these are particularly fine, and maybe there is some hope for them." "I don't know many boys," answered Lois thoughtfully. "Those I do seem very nice and quiet." "You ought to meet some of the Weston boys," exclaimed Betty hotly. "They send you comic valentines and mimic you. Edith and I just pass them by with scorn, our noses up in the air. But," she went on enthusiastically, "if these boys are like Bishop Wayborn, they'll be splendid. Am I all right?" She was dressed in her new woman's suit with a yellow rose in her buttonhole. She looked extremely pretty and interesting. "Well, you're a wonder. You can wear anything," said Lois. "Oh," she continued with a groan, "if my recitation were only over, I would be happy." "'Tis never too late for delight, my dear," quoted Betty. Mary Livingstone had been assigned the leading part in the play. To this her age and standing in the school entitled her. The other parts were distributed among the better-known girls of the different classes. Of these, Betty had one of the most prominent, and the fact that a new girl had been selected for it caused a good deal of envy and excited comment among the less fortunate. "Why should Bet Baird be in the play?" asked Caroline of Miriam. "Oh, she's Miss Greene's pet, as everyone can see," answered that sweet-natured girl. "Someone said she is related to Miss Payne," said a girl standing by. "Never in the world! That country girl?" protested Miriam. Well, that country girl, as you call her, Miriam, is growing mighty popular, and she certainly comes within an ace of being the cleverest girl in the school. Even Leedy had to own up that she was pretty when I asked her," said Jessie in her teasing way. "Jess Bentworth, I am surprised at you. Did you have the impudence to ask Miss Leet such a question when you know how trying that country girl is to her?" "That country girl," again quoted Jess maliciously, "wouldn't be so trying in algebra if Leedy were fair." "I didn't know that you too had become a victim of that designing snip," retorted Miriam. "Oh, I haven't become a victim, but I do like a girl who can read Virgil as well as she can." At this there was a cold-hearted giggle at Miriam's expense. "Dogs delight to bark and bite, for 'tis their nature to," said Mary Livingstone as she passed the angry Miriam and the cool, tormenting Jess. "Wait, Mary, I'll go with you," cried the exasperated Miriam, glad to get out of the clutches of the greatest tease in the school. As Miriam walked off with Mary, she saw Betty coming towards them, arm in arm with Dorothy. "You can't budge an inch without seeing that hateful thing," muttered Miriam. "Now, Miriam," said the philosophical Mary, "you can't keep down a splendid girl like Betty," and turning directly towards her, she added emphatically, "you only make yourself disliked by trying." The play was a success. Betty astonished everyone by her spirited interpretation, for while her lines were no more important than several others, so vivid was her presentation that in the eyes of the audience she assumed a place fully equal to Mary's. This was due largely to her old childish habit of make-believe, which she had kept much longer than the majority of girls. Before the hour set for beginning, she had gone off alone for a while and imagined herself into the part. The bishop was carried away by her spirited acting, and applauded as vigorously as his young grandson Reginald, with whom he fully agreed that she was great. He had a humorous recollection of the blushing young face of the day before, and it gave him the interest one feels in an acquaintance. Betty caught a glance from his keen eyes, shining young and blue out of the florid, weather-beaten, white-crowned face. His eagle nose and thin compressed lips showed the man of iron will. He possessed in a marked degree that look of authority which comes after many years of executive power, but over his stern features radiated a smile so bright and glancing, so kind, that Betty, in speaking of it to Miss Greene, likened it to the waters of a spring rippling over a rock. The latent fire of hero worship was kindled, and Betty found in the bishop a hero. When she had changed back into the little girl of 14, a little bunch of lilacs, Miss Greene took the roommates up to him, and the bishop thought he had never seen a dearer little face than the one looking up so shyly into his. Betty had, in 3½ months, discovered that it was not necessary for her to make conversation, something she had had much trouble to learn. She now had a great desire to say something witty to her hero, but as nothing came to her, she did not give herself any anxiety about being entertaining, as she would have done formerly. Miss Greene had seen this haste to make conversation, the outgrowth of her leadership and a detestation of things poky, and had impressed upon her a quotation from her favorite novelist, one too deep and difficult for Betty to read, but the wisdom of the quotation was not obscure, even to a girl of 14. "Preserve your composure until you have something to say. Wait for your opening. It will come, and the right word with it. The main things are to be able to stand well, walk well, and look with an eye at home in its socket." Knowing Betty's temptation and excitement to pump up her wit, Miss Greene enlarged on it and applied it with friendly remorselessness. While Betty's ready wit and originality, combined with more sterling qualities, had won the schoolgirls, to the tired, world-worn bishop her pretty quiet way of looking up at him had more attraction than repartee. The bishop enjoyed a good joke, though it was said that his own were only passable, and tonight, with his young grandsons, lads of 15 and 17, he was the youngest of the group. You children talk here while I speak to Miss Payne and the other folks I know. When I come back, I'll tell you a first-class story. Come, Miss Green. Paul here is studying for the priesthood. He'll be chaperone. Besides, the new woman doesn't need one." As he said this, the bishop placed his white, firm Episcopal hand on the shoulder of a tall, slender, handsome youth, with a pale face lighted up by the spirit of an enthusiast, then moved off in his joyous, stately fashion. "He always says that," grumbled Paul. "He? Who's he?" asked Betty pertly. She thought he should speak more respectfully of his splendid old grandfather. The boy turned away proudly, vexed and hurt. It is hard to tell when boys are hurt, they hide it so carefully. Betty decided that he was a sulky fellow, and as such he was especially displeasing to her. Better have them rude and teasing if one must have them, she thought, as she started away. She had gone only a step or two when Paul called to her, half commanding, half pleading. "Please excuse me." "Oh, certainly," she said casually. Then, glancing at the big boy and seeing something that made her sorry for him, her kind little heart relented, and she came near him again and began asking him all sorts of questions rather teasingly. Wouldn't he please tell her about his work? Was he going to be a priest? Was he high church? Ought she call him father? She hurled these questions at the lad until he didn't know what to do. He tried to be tactful, but blundered terribly. "I am only a student," he said at last, "and I think you would find a description of our work much more interesting than church history." "Oh, I love church history. I was reared on it," exclaimed Betty. "But this is no place for a serious discussion," replied the desperate youth. "But ought you lose an opportunity for enlightening me?" At this he looked decidedly grumpy, which did not surprise her, for to her all boys were alike unamiable. "Perhaps you don't approve of acting," she suggested primly. "I enjoy Shakespeare, when he is faithfully portrayed," Paul replied in a cold, impersonal voice. "Oh, I have never seen him portrayed," she answered exasperatingly, for she thought him affected. "The play tonight," she continued, "must have been painful to one like you." This ambiguous remark made the serious youth glance at her to read its meaning. "Did you find your part congenial? Do you like a mannish woman?" he asked abruptly. "But I am only a little girl," she answered, laughing. "At least they won't let me have long skirts, though I beg hard." Looking into the ascetic's eyes, she saw there much seriousness but little humor. He would not be diverted. "I'm not much older than you, and I would not condescend to take a womanish part." "Oh, I should hope not," cried Betty, concealing her desire to laugh at the idea of this stately youth in such a frivolous guise. "She has nice feelings," thought Paul, who took himself tremendously in earnest. He brought her a chair. "My grandfather told me about seeing you yesterday." She reddened and exclaimed spiritedly, "It wasn't fair of him. It isn't fair to make people ashamed of things there isn't any wrong in." "Anyway, you have won his heart," Paul said apologetically. "Why, it was wonderful that he should speak of me," said the girl, her eyes wide with surprise. It seemed as if some great statue, with its head in the clouds, had spoken of her. "We have lived with grandfather and grandmother ever since our mother died." "Oh, how awful!" exclaimed Betty. "Awful to live with grandfather?" inquired the surprised Paul. "Oh, no, that is beautiful, but not to have a mother. Lois hasn't a mother either. I don't see how people live without them." "We were too young to feel it, and our grandparents have been everything to us. Father's business compels him to travel a great deal." To Betty, he was someone to be sorry for, just as Lois was. "What a smart little piece your friend is," said Reginald to Lois, looking towards Betty. "Piece!" repeated Lois in surprise. But looking into his merry blue eyes, she saw that in his boyish fashion he had expressed genuine admiration for her friend. I never," he continued in his happy young voice, "saw a girl go through a thing the way she did that tonight. And Granddad said so too. And she's only 14. Why, I'm a year older than that, and I couldn't begin to do it. Did she ever do it before?" "No, this was her first time." "Gee whiz!" gasped the boy, and the two talked on, having a congenial subject. "You are going home tomorrow, I suppose," said Reginald to Betty. "I am thankful to say I am," she answered. "You are coming back?" asked Paul in a peremptory manner. "If I must," she answered, wholly nettled at his air of disapprobation. "You then find school irksome, and would like to escape?" pursued Paul in his earnest way, scolding, Betty thought it. "All the world round, if man bear to have it so, things which might vex him shall be found." She quoted her favorite defense wearily in answer, as the bishop approached to make his adieus. The two girls were silent until they reached their room, when Betty burst into a flood of tears. She was overwrought from the strain of the play and the excitement following it. Half laughing, she made her defense. "I am only a little country girl after all. See how you bear it." "Yes, but I didn't have half to do that you had." "Your recitation was perfect. I was so proud of you." "With your triumph you can afford to be generous," said Lois. "That big boy didn't like it," answered Betty dejectedly. "His grandfather did, and his brother thinks you were wonderful." "Oh, he doesn't know anything. He's only 6 months older than I am. I asked him, and I don't care what he thought. But the bishop's nice compliments did puff me up a little." End of chapter 11. Recording by Holly Jensen.